Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthias. I am Abby Davis, and today we will be reading Chapter 25, Bonding Session. If you missed Chapter 24, you can go back using the playlist or the link in the description below. And if you are all caught up and ready to go, we will continue on with Chapter 25, Bonding Session.
As I kept my chin up and continued on with life, my powers strengthened over time as anyone can imagine, and I needed to get control over them. The firepower obviously was my biggest problem besides the muscle growth. Not that it was hard to control around Abby, but it was harder in times of solitude and loneliness. My thoughts and worries involving Satan kept creeping into my head, activating the powers. Although that was a struggle, I found out that Abby somehow became some sort of calming mechanism for me. Just one thought about her washed away my troubles for an extended period of time. Even with a glance, my ocean of anger calmed. Whenever I felt that heat or tingling sensation upon earth, I would turn my gaze to her and think about what she was doing. Somehow, in some way, it calmed me enough for the feelings to go away. However, when it got super bad to the point I would flame up, I teleported myself to my house in hell. I didn't want her to know what was happening until I knew more about it and could control it. I didn't need her thinking I was a ticking bonfire waiting to light. It was already bad enough I had to worry about the muscle growth in front of her. Yet, I finally got it to the point where it only acts up when I become extremely defensive or protective. So it wasn't the biggest issue ever. But even then, a glance at Abby cured that issue of bursting out of my shirt or pants. As for the other powers I had, nothing else was new with them. Now, I probably failed to elaborate on the teleportation ability and left some people confused. I'm sorry about that, and I'll explain. Well, to start off, I was confused as hell when it first happened. The night I discovered this was when Abby had another nightmare and I was patiently sitting in her computer chair waiting for her to fall asleep. She eventually drifted into a deep sleep and I was thinking about getting some shut-eye myself. After only a few seconds thinking about it, I was rapidly teleported and slammed down on my bed located in the fiery outskirts of hell. I didn't know how I even did that, but yet it was somehow controlled by my thoughts. There was no flash, no feeling, or no warning. It just happened and it was crazy. However, I wanted to see if it would happen again when I thought about the cosplay room in Abby's house. Sure enough, after some thought, I teleported right back to the room without hesitation. After looking back at my educational materials, I remembered and recalled that after 3 months, the protector demon could roam free away from the child no matter what. The day that happened was July 24th. Just 2 days after our 3-month mark of being paired together. Despite the incident, more time has passed since then, and I already got the hang of it. Regardless of my progress, it was now August 15th, and my mindset was focused on the bond between Abby and I. Yes, she was more accepting of me being around, but I could tell she wasn't comfortable with the aspect of me being who I was still. Her church services certainly didn't help that either, considering they kept pounding the idea of evil demons into her head. There would still be times she would look at me and quickly turn away, closing her eyes. That was the typical response to something frightening or unbelievable. It was like she was worried more about my appearance rather than my personality, and I wanted to know why. Was it the religious barrier that she kept clashing into when it came to me? Or was it some other personal reason or feeling that hovered over her like a dark cloud? So I decided to find the perfect way to ask her about those things. And it came on a Sunday morning as we were lounging around, doing absolutely nothing. Abby laid in bed scrolling through her social media while I gazed at the time on her computer as it displayed 10:30 a.m. We almost wasted half the morning by sitting around and she wasn't even talking to me. So, I decided that today seemed like the perfect day to try and bond with her. Hey, you got anything actually planned for today besides laying in bed? I said, interrupting the video she was watching. She then quickly paused it, brought the phone down from her face, and spoke.
Nope. I'm a total free bird today.
Well, then how about we do something?
If you're asking to cosplay, I am not in the mood, and neither is my body.
She said, sitting up in her bed. That's not what I'm implying, and you know it.
Then what do you suggest that we do?
How about we actually go out and hang out, you know? We have been through quite a bit lately and haven't really had the chance to talk and connect like normal human beings.
Well, I hate to state the obvious, Darius, but
Don't even go there, smartass, I interrupted. I get I am not human anymore, but that doesn't mean that having a day to ourselves and interacting is the worst idea ever. We could do more than just small talk like we have been doing. I firmly believe it's possible. We both paused for a little bit as she somewhat hung her head in shame. However, I brushed her intended comment away and started fresh. Why don't we go out for lunch and start there? Abby chuckled as she threw her blankets off her body and twisted herself to face me.
go out and make myself look nuts by talking to nothing? Oh, yes. Brilliant idea, dude.
What? No, I would shapeshift into the girl form. That way we can have a face-to-face conversation without others thinking you're crazy. Plus, we haven't had anything traumatic happen in over a month. I think we should take advantage of the day and spend it wisely by talking and enjoying each other's company. Abby glared at me for a few seconds as she kept contemplating her decision. I knew she was skeptical about it, and she probably took into consideration that I wasn't very fond of the female form I could change into. Yet I was willing to become Darla in order to grow the relationship between us. Plus, the clothes she just bought for that form would be put to use. So trying to lean her more towards yes, I decided to use my shape-shifting power right in front of her. Using my hands, I initiated the red smoke to surround me as my changes took place. I accidentally inhaled some of the smoke, which made me cough slightly. Yet the transformation went on regardless, and I eventually stood in front of Abby as a full female. As I got my bearings again, I placed my hand out towards her and spoke. Come on, you need to get out for some fresh air anyway. After that, she finally gave in and grabbed my hand to say,
Okay, fine. You win. We can go out.
With that response, I helped her up so we could both get ready to go. I got dressed in my new red and black texture shirt, black formal pants, and black flats that made me look presentable, while Abby changed into a graphic t-shirt that read, Easily Distracted by Cows, and matched it with a pair of blue jeans. Once we were dressed and settled, we decided to go to the Golden Rose to eat, as we were both familiar with the menu and the establishment. She still texted her mom saying that she was going to hang out with Darla while her mom was in town with her dad. Obviously, her mom was okay with it. They just liked keeping each other notified on their locations. After that, we placed the small dogs in their kennels and we were on our way. After about a 20-minute drive, we got to the restaurant and waited to be seated by the hostess. Conveniently enough, We were placed at a corner table that practically secluded us from everything. There wasn't that many people in the restaurant to begin with, but this worked out way better than expected. The table we were seated at was within the corner of the room near the kitchen where semi-loud noises filled the air. Yet it wasn't enough to hinder a conversation. Guess it was just a big coincidence. Anyhow, as we were seated, our waiter took our drink orders and left to go fetch them. Once we were alone again, I took advantage and started to talk. Now that we have some privacy, I want to lay the cards down on the table. I can tell that you are still uncomfortable with me, and it's okay to be. I know this isn't the easiest thing to get used to, especially given your circumstances with religion and such. So I am hoping that with spending time together today, I can help you become more serene with all of this. As I said that, she gripped the menu a little harder and clenched every muscle she had for a split second. I knew she felt a little nervous as she was technically talking to a demon, but yet she kept her cool and stayed silent so I could continue with my opening statement. I want to have an honest conversation with you as if I was a true human again. And with that being said, I am inviting you to ask whatever questions you may have about me or bring up your concerns. I will try my hardest to be an open book with you, but please don't be offended if there is a question or two that I don't feel comfortable answering. Certain topics are difficult for me to talk about, but I will do my best to reply. Once I completed my rant, she glanced at me with innocent eyes, displaying a sort of blank face towards me. I understood she was a little hesitant and debating on what to ask or if she should even try to question things. However, she eventually gave into her slight curiosity and laid down the menu onto the table.
Well, how do you expect me to start this? I do not want to step on your toes right out of the gate.
But how do you know you will if you don't try? After that rebuttal, she took a deep breath and gazed out the window for a brief moment. Once she was ready, she asked her first question, solicitously.
I do believe that you were a doctor when you were alive by the way you talk and explain things. But when you traveled with me to my grandparents' house on the first Sunday you were paired with me, I could see confusion written on your face because of your environment.
My eyes must have widened a bit as she said that, because right after she replied with,
Don't think that I didn't notice that, because I did. But besides the point, I want to know why you were so confused. Where did you live before everything happened?
Believe it or not, New York. Born and raised. However, I never really caught on to their strong accent.
Well, I certainly never would have guessed that.
Who would? But that is why I looked confused. I never really had the chance to go to the countryside or even be placed within a small town. As you can probably imagine, I was exposed to crowds and aggressive shouting from rush hour traffic and businesses. I didn't really take in the beauty of nature or landscapes, so my head was reeling. Once I answered the question fully, the waiter brought our drinks and took our lunch orders. She got her normal pasta dish, and I got the steak and mushrooms with loaded mashed potatoes. However, this time around, she also ordered an appetizer of mozzarella sticks. As soon as that was taken care of, he swiftly walked away again to put the order in as we got back into our private setting.
What hospital did you work at?
Abby asked curiously. Grandview Medical Hospital. It was, and maybe is still, one of the top hospitals within the state of New York. It was almost impossible for graduates to land a job there. They were always searching for the most elite doctors that had a lot of experience under their belt. I was considered the luckiest employee there for being hired right out of college.
Wait, really? Why were you hired, though? They must have seen something in you for them to take such a bold measure.
Well, they told me that my knowledge within the career field was extremely advanced and expanded compared to most interviewers. I may have majored within one branch of medicine, but I also took time to educate myself on other medical branches. I studied multiple subjects such as oncology, diagnostic radiology, family medicine physicians, and pediatrics.
How could you have possibly learned all about that stuff within your college years?
She asked, practically jumping in her seat. I was joyous to see her intrigued by the conversation that I couldn't help but let my excitement show too as I responded. I had a lot of time on my hands. I wasn't the partying type in college and I loved to read. And I still do. I read lots as I had to spend 4 years within a regular college setting and another 4 years within a medical college. Then I had to choose where I wanted to go for my residency. I took a shot at Grandview, and they took me in because of all the knowledge I had. Abby sat in her seat shocked as hell by everything I said, but also, it almost looked like she was embarrassed at the same time. Her eyes gazed at the table while her mouth formed into a slight frown and her hands started to fidget. Upon those physical responses, I quickly chimed in to hopefully pick up her spirits. Hey, I didn't mean to degrade you or anything. That is just the truth. I didn't really have a life like you do. I had friends, but I didn't hang out with them as much. Looking back upon it now, I should have socialized with them more than what I did. As my history stands, my life has just been about my career and knowledge within the medical field, even though I had a wife, kid, and family that loved me dearly. You should be proud that you have the life that you do. She then lifted her head back up to me and made eye contact as she said,
But I'm not as knowledgeable as you. You know so much and sound super smart. How could I have gotten paired with such an intelligent person? What in the world do I have that compares to that?
Well, for starters, it's not like I'm the smartest guy on the planet. I don't even come close to Einstein, I said, contradicting her question. However, your art abilities and the programs that you're currently using for school could definitely be compared to my knowledge of the medical field. I have no experience with that kind of thing. I can't even wrap my head around some of the things you create, Abby. You are making animations and videos that are compelling to the eye, and you're constantly learning with new tutorials to advance your skills. Just because I was a doctor doesn't mean that I know everything about life and other aspects of it. What you know about technology and art is still impressive. We both kind of sat in silence for a bit as she processed my words. I was also kind of surprised that she put herself down like that. It was almost like her mindset was programmed to downgrade herself compared to everyone around her. She was comparing things against her personality and intelligence that seemed more impressive within society's eyes. However, everyone was unique in their own way. Each person has their spark or flair that makes them stand out compared to others. Hers just happened to be within the creative field rather than medical, which was perfectly okay. After a brief reflection, she moved the conversation along to a different topic.
I know we only brushed the surface on this next question and talked about it once when we first met. But what did you exactly do before this?
I felt my eyes widen a bit again, as I wasn't expecting her to ask that. I knew she was asking about my previous job, but I didn't know if I wanted to go into detail. So I tried to play dumb and said, "What do you mean before? We just talked about it." She sarcastically tilted her head to me, not believing my remark, as she lifted an eyebrow.
Darla,
She said in a stern voice.
I know you understood what I meant. I guess this is one of those touchy subjects for you, huh?
As I was caught in my lie, I immediately felt remorseful that I let out a deep sigh and decided to answer her question truthfully. As a matter of fact, it is. It isn't for the faint of heart, and I still have a hard time reflecting back on some of the instances that occurred while I was working that job. But because you caught on to my charade, I will do my best to talk about it. I took another deep breath and adjusted myself within my seat as I suddenly started getting nervous. The topic itself was distasteful for me and wasn't my favorite thing to discuss. Yet I knew this had to happen. So upon my last moment of calmness, I started to allow the repulsive words come out of my mouth. I used to be Satan's dealmaker. My job was to go to the troubled souls on Earth and make ridiculous deals with them that only screwed with their lives more.
How did you know if they were troubled or not? Maybe they were just having a bad day.
She asked, a little uneasy. Well, I can't give you extreme specifics because I don't even know. However, these deals were targeted towards those who were stuck at a rock bottom, if you get what I mean. I was given files that combined information about the individual I had to interact with. It gave me their name, age, and their case as to why they were so troubled. Based on their problem, Satan created the kind of deal they had and placed it in writing to inform me on the terms and conditions of the contract. However, he would always create deception within his associating wordplay. I was forced to present the potential deal using his dialogue and create a hoax that would lead the victim into more purgatory. I'd rather not get into the specifics on the different kinds of deals because I know it's disquieting. Yet I did have a teleporting device that teleported me from one place to another. Seeing how Satan didn't want to partner with me and help, I carried a small mechanism that would take me to each victim with just a touch of a button. That way I could travel faster and make more deals. Abby sat in her seat puzzled after everything. I could tell she was perplexed about something I said, but I didn't know exactly what. At least not until she finally asked it.
How were the people not scared of you? Did you wear a disguise or something?
Some of them were scared, but most were so distraught that they thought they were hallucinating. I was never given a disguise.
But what if they weren't willing to make a deal with you or said no?
I'd let them be. I hated my job to begin with, and I wasn't desperate like the head honcho downstairs is. I wasn't going to force a person to interact or agree to a deal that I offered them.
Well, wouldn't that drive
Satan absolutely crazy? Oh yeah. I interrupted, knowing where she was going with that question. He absolutely hated the fact that I wasn't relentless in persuading people. He always scolded me for not putting in the effort at being a manipulator.
Then why doesn't he have someone go with you to make sure you're doing your job right? Or better yet, replace you with someone else who is better fitting for the job?
Great question. Who the hell knows? I didn't agree to be his stupid dealmaker. After that, we sat in silence for about a minute to let our feelings settle. I was sure she took the time to reflect while I was making sure my emotions were in check. I started getting mad towards the end of the conversation. Satan was the most problematic being I had to deal with. All the lies and events he made me go through shaped me into the aggressive prick that I was towards him. He deserved it. I was probably the only one in hell who showed defiance towards him. No matter the consequences, I wasn't going to change my attitude towards him. He ruined my life. There was no way I was gonna bend to his standards or rules. Not anymore. I am technically supposed to be somewhat free from him because of my new job, but for some reason he can't bugger off. As the pause continued, the waiter came with our steaming hot appetizer and placed it on the table. Abby grabbed one of the mozzarella sticks and asked another question, swinging it around a bit.
I understand that the kind of relationship you have with Satan isn't a good one based on the interactions I saw between you two. I totally get your feelings towards him, and you have every right to be upset with him. Yet what confuses me is why Satan seems to hate you so much. To me, anyway, I thought he would be dwelling and reveling in other people's pain and suffering. Shouldn't he be happy to watch you live in pain and sorrow because of the deal you made with him?
After that question, I really did pause to reflect upon it while eating a mozzarella stick. She had a strong point and wasn't wrong about that aspect of Satan. It was his best quality to laugh at the anguish of others. However, it did seem like he didn't quite get the enjoyment from my situation or status. It was a confusing and tricky question, but I did my best to answer it. Don't doubt yourself on that accusation. He most certainly does enjoy dwelling on the hardship of others. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into his office as he was laughing at the local tragedies column within our printed newspaper. He always finds a way to enjoy the pain and suffering of others. When it comes to me, though, I guess it's different. When everything first happened, he was overwhelmed with excitement and joy about my situation. I could still remember every single time he overflowed my ears with his evil laughter. He knew how much pain he caused me and my family. Because of what happened, my wife raised or is still raising our son alone. Hell, I don't even know if my son was actually cured or not. But that still doesn't change the fact that I am forced to live as this God-forsaken being for the rest of my supernatural life. You think he would be extremely happy to see me like this, but he just...
Darla,
Abby interrupted, grabbing my hand.
remember to keep your emotions calm. You don't have to explain anymore.
Then she rolled my sleeve up a bit to reveal the muscles within my arms starting to bulge and develop. After realizing that, I gazed back at her, disappointed in myself. I should have just kept the answer simple. But of course, I had to try and push myself to rant. Yet, as I sat ashamed of what happened, she ended up interrupting my thoughts.
I'm sorry for asking. I didn't know you were heading in that direction. You didn't have to answer if you were uncomfortable. I understand it's a different case between you two, so I'll leave it at that.
We both sat in another silent session as she kept brushing my hand with her fingers. I assumed it was an act of kindness and sympathy to help calm me down in some way. It was interesting to say the least, and it worked oddly enough. We both watched the muscles die down and shift back to their normal sizes. However, I was more surprised that my muscles acted up instead of my fire. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was glad I didn't flame up in the restaurant. That would have been really hard to explain. But I guess I still had some issues to work out with the muscle thing. After about 2 minutes of watching everything resort back to normal, our food came out and we interacted with small talk. That way we could eat and still talk at the same time while filling the air with a more pleasant conversation. During this time, the discussion was more targeted towards her, as we mostly talked about her past. As she would recall certain memories, I could see them playing within my vision as she spoke. Quite literally. I didn't tell her that just because I didn't want to take away the moment from her or freak her out. I got her this far to where she was willingly talking about herself. I didn't want that to backtrack. so I kept listening and allowed the memories to block my vision for a bit. Once we finished eating and indulged in the delightful conversation, she decided to change our plans.
I think I know where we could go to get your bottled up anger out.
What do you mean? Didn't I just get it out? I asked.
Darius, even you should know how anger works. It doesn't just go away within an instant.
I felt a little offended after that remark. I did know how anger worked. Or I at least thought I did. I guess it could be a possibility that I have dwelled within it for so long that I never could let go of it. Ever since my demon life started, I felt nothing but anger and regret. It wasn't until I was partnered with Abby that I started to experience positive emotions again. After that realization, I spoke out. What do you suggest then, Miss Davis?
I'll drive you to it. I promise it'll be fun.
Upon that statement, she quickly paid the bill, and we were off again to another destination. As she moved through the city, I didn't recognize the streets or buildings surrounding us, as I have never traveled them before. Yet, as we pulled up to a random structure, I noticed that our location was placed within a strip mall. One big building that contained different businesses such as shops and activities, I assume, if Abby drove here. She wasn't the kind of girl to shop, and that didn't seem like the typical way to relieve anger. However, I wouldn't know exactly until I followed her to our final destination. Once we entered the establishment, we walked to a place where a LED sign read, Reggie's Axe Throwing, and glowed brightly from outside the entrance. Now this was something totally unexpected. I knew there were things like this down in hell where you could actually throw axes at people. However, I didn't realize it was an actual thing in the human world now. I'm sure that there is no killing involved. But either way, I was excited to do something for the first time in a long time. As we walked in, there were no other customers. Only one guy, who was probably in his mid-30s, was standing behind a counter that displayed choices of drinks and merchandise. But once he saw us appear in full view, he displayed a big smile and extended his arms out.
Well, if it isn't my favorite customer!
He exclaimed, walking around the counter towards Abby.
Hey, Reggie. Good to see you again.
And they both wrapped themselves in a hug, showing friendship for a brief moment. After the quick embrace, she began instructing him that we wanted a private room with a throwing lane and that I really needed to relieve some stress. He then showed us the way and guided us to a lane. He explained everything about axe throwing and the safety precautions one should take when throwing. Once he was done with his rant, he bid us well, left the room, and closed the door to separate us from the rest of the establishment. Well, I certainly didn't think you were into this kind of stuff, I said, shocked as my voice was back to normal. The area must have been secluded enough from the world that my female voice was able to deactivate for a while.
It's like you say, don't judge a book by its cover.
She said, throwing an axe at the wooden target. It struck right in the bullseye, and I stood impressed. I suppose you don't come here often, I said, chuckling. She turned back to me and smiled as she said,
I used to come here every other week before you came along. It's been a while since I've done this. But clearly I see I still got it. Now you try.
You expect me to compete with that bullseye you just made?
Darius, the whole reason why we came here was for you. It's not a competition. This is for your benefit and also something else we can do to have fun. That was your goal for today, wasn't it?
I nodded in response, still not saying a word.
Okay then. Now get up here.
I did as she instructed and took the axe from her hand as she continued to advise me.
I want you to picture the target as Satan.
I chuckled a little, intruding on her teaching lesson. I thought she was joking. However, her expression told me different, and I actually stopped in my tracks. I changed my tone and continued listening to her lecture.
I'm serious. If you imagine the target as the head honcho, you could channel that anger out without getting involved with him. It's a coping mechanism that has helped me with my anger in the past. Maybe it could help you too. Plus, who wouldn't want to imagine throwing an axe at their worst enemy?
Upon that, I nodded my head and tried to do as she requested. I lined my body up and angled my arms above my head with the axe ready to fly through the air. I closed my eyes for a moment thinking about Satan, and it didn't take long for a picture to pop into my head. All I could imagine was his evil smirk and piercing eyes that mocked me every time I saw that expression. Once I had that horrendous face recalled from my memory, I threw the axe forward to release the anger that was building up just from the look of his face. As I heard the slamming of the axe on the wood, I opened my eyes back up to see that the exact same face was somehow projected onto the wall. The funnier part was that the axe landed right in between his eyes. I turned myself back to Abby in amazement as she was wide-eyed with her mouth slightly ajar. However, she started to laugh after a few seconds and congratulated me on my shot. I nervously said thank you, and she read my tension.
I know it's something you can't control. I'm sure you didn't know you could do that. But let's utilize this now to get your anger out.
After that moment, she let me continuously throw the axes at the projected face on the wall. Before each throw, I kept thinking about my enemy's face and conjured all the anger I had from him. With every attempt, I felt a little bit of the aggression leave my body and was finally releasing 13 torturous years of suffering I had built up. As I continued the axe throwing for 5 minutes straight, I also started to think about how drastically my life has changed. Even though I will never get rid of the feeling of betraying my wife and son from my sudden abandonment, I still found myself feeling less miserable. I wasn't making deals anymore with the less unfortunate on earth for Satan's pleasure, and I wasn't purposely causing strife. That all changed when I was somehow transferred into this protector demon role. Was it easy to adapt to? Absolutely not, and I am still trying to adapt. With Satan intruding on top of that made it even worse. But even though I was confused as to why I was paired up with a woman instead of a man at the time, I realized I wouldn't want it any other way. Despite all the hardships Abby and I have been through, we somehow made it this far and didn't despise one another. With that being said, I realized that recognizable warm feeling growing within my chest again as I truly thought about my protector child. This time, though, I let it sink in and develop in order to pinpoint exactly why I was feeling this way. It was time to confront this sensation head on instead of avoiding it. However, it didn't sink in for very long when I decided to give myself a rest and let Abby have a few turns. So as we switched positions, she started to start a conversation with me again.
So, if I may ask, how did you meet Nala?
Even though I didn't think she was going to ask a question like that, I didn't hesitate to answer. I met her at a nightclub.
You went clubbing?
No, I chuckled. I was dragged into it by my friends to get away from my studies. They told me I was drowning myself within my schooling and that I needed to party. I kept refusing as I wasn't interested. However, they quite literally dragged me out of my dorm and into the car one night.
But wait, weren't you wearing pajamas or something?
Well, no, actually. I was wearing formal clothes as I had a presentation for one of my classes and had to dress formally. Once I got back to my dorm, I just sat at my desk and started studying for another exam I had 2 days later. Once I got a nod from her, I continued on with my story. We entered the Mahogany Club, and I was pretty much being pulled everywhere we went. Eventually, I found out they were trying to hook me up with random ladies at the club by forcefully introducing me to random individuals.
Damn! They were that desperate to find you a girl that they actually found you one?
She exclaimed, turning around from the axe throwing lane to face me. No, I didn't find any interest in the girls I met through them. They acted like floozies, and I was not appreciative of that.
So then where does Nala come into play?
She asked eagerly. I could tell she was a little ambitious to hear my love story. She totally stopped throwing the axe, came to the table where I was standing, and immediately sat herself down as I saw her face light up with curiosity. Abby, I'm getting there, I snickered. One of the girls that I was introduced to insisted that I had to dance with her on the dance floor. With my friends being the persistent group that they were, they peer pressured me into doing so. So I was led to a spot on the dance floor with a random red-haired woman I knew nothing about. As I was doing the stereotypical two-step sway that guys do, I turned my head to my right and found Nala dancing across the way. She peered over her shoulder and met eye contact with me as we were both stuck with different dance partners. From that point on, I was mesmerized by her in every way, shape, and form. I was so intrigued that after gazing at each other for a bit, I walked away from the girl I was originally dancing with to advance towards Nala.
Wait, you just left that other girl? Didn't she find you later and complain?
Nope. I found her with one of my other friends hooking up, so I wasn't too worried about it.
So what did you two do after that?
I danced with her, of course. Like, actually danced with her. I took dance classes throughout my childhood and adolescent years, so I could dance well. I just didn't want to show my true potential with the random girl who tried extremely hard to hook up with me. After the night went on, I gained my wife's name, age, occupation, and her phone number to continue contact. From there, we formed a love that I never imagined I would have. After dating for 3 years, I proposed to her and we got married June 22nd in 1999. Then in August of 2000, Nella told me that she was pregnant. I gazed back up to Abby, realizing I was ranting to her about my love story, and cleared my throat. I'm sorry. I just realized I went on a rant,
Don't be sorry about that.
she said excitingly.
I'm glad you felt comfortable telling me about it. This is the most I've ever seen you talk about your life before. I liked listening to it.
When she said that, the warm sensation grew within my chest again and it brought a smile to my face. The day actually turned out into a success. She was listening and getting comfortable with me. I couldn't complain and I was extremely happy. So after about another 5 minutes, Abby paid for our session and it was time to head back to her home. As she drove, she asked me more questions about my extended family and what it was like living in New York. I kept answering her with honesty while hoping this was the point that Abby would start opening up to me as well. We ended up talking all the way home and shared a few laughs to end the car ride. Upon entering the basement, I had to take off my pants, shirt, and bra to change back to myself as her parents were home. Abby didn't want to deal with the whole Darla situation with them right now, and I didn't either, so I didn't blame her. Did I have to walk around in just my boxers for a bit? Sadly, yes. Nothing was ever extremely easy. Yet once we made it upstairs, she mingled with her parents while I went to the cosplay room to put on my designated clothes. Eventually, after a couple minutes, Abby walked into the room and closed the door. Looking at the clock on her dresser, I seen it was only 3:30 p.m. and we had plenty of time to kill. So I decided to speak up about it. So, what do you want to do now?
Well, we're in the cosplay room. I guess I will cosplay something.
She said, a little cheerful. Fair enough. I'll get out of your way then. And I moved myself to sit in her folding chair while she changed again. As the minutes started ticking by, I realized that she wasn't getting into her usual Jekyll cosplay. She was instead wearing a red and black buffalo plaid shirt with the same black wig and face paint she used for other characters. She grabbed a pair of square glasses and painted a full beard on her face along with a mustache and goatee. As I stared at this transformation, I found myself once again confused as to why she kept cosplaying male characters. Not that I had any reason to be judgmental or angry for it, but it just made the question of her being transgender pop into my head again. Reflecting upon it more, it could be the main reason why I was paired with her in the first place. Maybe she wanted to be a male and would eventually transition. But that could also be just a hypothesis. So, with that in mind, I wanted to confront her and bring closure to my curious mind. So, I have a serious question for you,
Okay, what's up?
she said, turning around with a face full of makeup and paint. I can't help but notice that you tend to cosplay more male characters instead of female.
Yeah, and? Is that a problem?
No, of course not. It just makes me curious about something.
Curious about what?
Well, I said, pausing briefly. I didn't want to sound impolite by asking my question. I knew it could potentially be a sensitive topic for her. However, I wouldn't know for sure until it was fully out in the open. After I finally established my sentence within my head, I brought the matter to her attention. It makes me curious about who you are as a person and who you want to be. At that moment, she stared at me with confusion and spoke out.
Darius, I don't clearly understand what you're getting at here. The way you said that makes me think you might have a problem with who I am as a person.
That's not what I meant at all. I have no issues with who you are. I support you in all your decisions and will keep supporting you no matter what you choose. I am just trying to be polite and not step on your toes with this question. But I guess I would like to know if you want to be a male yourself. I watched Abby's eyes widen for a bit as she stared at me with dismay. I could tell she was stunned by the topic, but it didn't take her long to reply back.
Thank you for being clearer with your question, and my answer is no. I feel comfortable with the body I was given and feel confident in the gender I am. I just like cosplaying male characters more because they appeal to me for some reason. It's also a plus that I get to fool people a bit with the makeup.
That's all right with me. I was just making sure, and my mind was curious. You can dress up as whoever you want, and I won't judge. After that, she smiled at me in acknowledgement, and we both continued on with the evening. After about 2 hours of her filming and us talking casually, Abby's phone started ringing from the phone stand, and she abruptly reacted to it in shock. What? Who is it? I asked, concerned.
It's Damien.
Well, answer it, I instructed. She hesitated for a second, but quickly swiped the answer button and placed the call on speaker so we both could hear him clearly.
Hello?
Hey, Abby. How have you been?
I've been good. Just doing my thing like usual, getting ready for school to start back up again. How about you?
I've been good as well. Work has been super busy, so I haven't been able to talk much. However, I would like to plan a day to spend time with you.
Oh, would you now?
She teased.
You implying another lunch outing with Miss Bratty?
Actually, I wanted to do something a little different.
Oh.
She said, a little shocked. However, when I looked at her face, it displayed confusion.
Then what is your proposal, good sir?
This is where I intently started listening to understand his plan.
I would like to take you out to dinner, just you and I. That way we can catch up again and freely talk. I was thinking the Nightingale in the downtown area.
At that statement, I saw her jaw nearly drop to the ground as she became awestruck. I became confused and quickly blurted out, "What is the Nightingale?" Abby then faced me while she replied to Damien.
You want to take me to one of the fanciest restaurants within the downtown area? You most certainly don't have to.
Well, I want to. I have the money to, and you deserve it. Then afterwards, I was thinking about hitting up Club Miracle to really have some fun. If you are okay with that, of course.
With all of that said, I knew that Damien was practically asking her out on a romantic date. He was finally going to make an advance and ask her out. He was officially conquering his fear. I was overjoyed, but kept it to myself as I peered at my human. However, as I looked at her face, she looked as if her skin was going pale and she was nervous on what to say. She was stuttering a bit, but the noises were inaudible. She just continued being dumbfounded and kept switching her gaze from me to the phone. I stood up from my chair and finally spoke to try and fix the broken record. "Abby, you need to answer him." Once I said that, she quickly shook her head to bring herself back to reality.
I'm sorry, Damien. Can you give me 1 second? My mom needs me quick.
Sure, no problem. I'll wait.
After his reply, she quickly muted herself and started talking to me.
I can't go with him.
What? Why not?
Because he is my friend. Friends don't just take other friends out to fancy restaurants to hang out. Even the nightclub thing is something more than just a friend meetup.
Just because he wants to take you to these places doesn't mean that he can't take you. It's just like he said. You deserve this. Why can't you allow yourself this opportunity and not let your mind talk for your heart?
Because I'm scared. What happens if this forms into something weird that affects our friendship? Damien is the closest friend I have, and I don't want anything jeopardizing that.
I glared at her with incredulity as I knew she was overreacting. She was scared of her own feelings towards him. Her mind is set to have a friendship while her heart wanted something more. Yet she wanted to keep things the way they were for cushion and safety. This bond between Abby and Damien was undeniable and was more than a friendship. I could see the writing on the wall. She was seriously contemplating on throwing away her opportunity with Damien because of her contradictions. I couldn't stand for that. So I knew I had to do something about it. "I'm sorry, Abby,"
For what?
she asked, perplexed. "For this." And I quickly grabbed her shoulder and forced a switch between us. Within a couple seconds, I now stood in her body while she was shockingly looking at her demon self. Yet I didn't take time to explain myself before I unmuted the phone and started talking to Damien.
Sorry about that, Damien. Now, to answer your question, I would love to go out to dinner with you. Also, I like the club idea. It sounds like fun.
Well, I'm glad you agree. I was thinking sometime next month so that I can let my work die down and you can adapt to your new classes. So how about September 26th at like 5:30? Does that work for you?
Darius, you're stepping over the line.
Abby interrupted, a little panicked. I knew she was going to be scared about this date. Any person would be scared going on a first date, especially if it was with your best friend. She would never agree to this because of her closed mind. However, this was going to be one of the best decisions that would change her life forever. So I made sure to go through with my actions and made the plans with Damien regardless of her wishes.
That sounds perfect. I can't wait.
Me either. I hope the time flies by fast. Thanks, Abby. I'll see you then. Make sure to dress nicely. Goodbye.
I'll make sure of that. Bye, Damien.
After I heard the phone line close, I turned myself to Abby as she looked disconcerted. Her eyes glared into me like a hawk eyeing its prey while I started to disclose my reasoning. You can't just let your mind get in the way of happiness. I know how he makes you feel, and you physically display it in front of him. This is the type of man you want and need in your life. Any woman would die to have a guy like Damien as a boyfriend. I am telling you that he is the one for you. I can feel it.
But you don't have a say in it, or the right to control who I am with. Especially when it comes to him. I don't want to lose him, Darius. I don't want things to become awkward between us if something bad happens. Plus, you can't force us to like each other.
I haven't forced anything. You made this for yourselves over the years, and you could make it into something amazing. Can't you see where I'm coming from? The way you exclaim how you don't want to lose him shows me that he means the world to you. It may be hard for you to admit your feelings straight out, but I know you love him, Abby. And based on the way he acts around you, he most definitely loves you too. Otherwise, he wouldn't want to do these things for you or show you all of this affection. This date isn't going to harm your relationship. It is only going to strengthen it. She paused slightly after my speech, weakening her intense gaze. But her body language and facial expression started to shift to signs of embarrassment as she started second-guessing.
Is it really?
Yes, of course it is. This date is going to be your gateway to finding true happiness for yourself in this life. That is all anyone can ask for, and you're so lucky to find it so young. Don't let your worries get in the way of that. After that, she started to smile a bit from comprehending everything I told her. I knew she was calming herself down from the panic, and she was finally starting to see the good in my decision to accept his invitation. So upon that, I asked one final question. Now, after hearing me out, are you willing to go through and go on this date with Damien? So as I observed her response, she hesitated slightly and stared at the ground for a moment. However, eventually, I saw my protector child nod in agreement to go on her date.
This has been Chapter 25, Bonding Session, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune into the next video to see how my date goes. Oh boy.